Great, thanks. I'll kick us off here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 12th meeting of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. My name is Stella Jordan. I'm the Public Engagement Program Manager at the Boston Region MPO, and I'll just take us through some housekeeping items to get us started. First, I'll read our notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostonmpo.org/MPO_non_discrimination. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact me, Stella Jordan of MPO staff, at sjordan@ctps.org, at 857-702-3675, or via the Zoom chat box. And just a few guidelines for our meeting today. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. You may mute and unmute yourselves during the meeting, but please remain muted unless you're actively speaking. And to participate in the discussion, select the raised hand function. You can find this by either clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raised hand button at the bottom, or in the reactions button in the toolbar, and the chair will call on you. And if you're joining by phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And I'll hand it back to you, Len, for intros.
Thank you, Stella. So we don't have a packed agenda. It's a full meeting, but I think we have the number of attendants where we can go around and do some intros. So I will just call names. So AC Fregosa.
Anna Christina Fregoso with the Boston Society of Civil Engineers.
Thank you, Anna. Christina. Aaron McGuire. Actually, Aaron, you're going to be presenting, so I'll save you for the last. Ethan LaPointe. Right. Ethan's not there. So Fred Mosley.
Yeah, Fred Mosley with the American Council of Engineering Companies.
Okay, Gia, please help me out with your last name. I should know. I'm sorry.
It's okay. My name is Gia Hong, and I'm the Public Engagement Coordinator at MPO.
Thank you, Gia. John McQueen.
John McQueen, Walk, Massachusetts.
Thank you, John. Logan Casey.
Hey everyone, Logan Casey representing Town of Marblehead.
Thank you, Logan. Regina Aris. Oh wow, Baltimore. Never mind. I shouldn't have said that. So anyways, Regina.
Hi, Regina Aris. I'm with the Baltimore MPO. I like to watch your interesting meetings from time to time.
Oh wow, well that's so flattering. Well, great. Well, thanks for joining us. It makes me want to check out your meetings now. If you like the advisory council meetings, you should really check out the info meetings. I'm sure you'd probably do that too. So Shravanti. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of scrolling down. I can hardly see the bottom of the screen, so if it's just not good to start with. But I think you're also going to be presenting, so I'll save you for last. And Streleka.
Hello, Streleka Murphy. I manage the Unified Planning Work Program for the Boston Region MPO.
Thanks, Streleka. And Tyler Tarasi.
Hi, Tyler Tarasi from the Metro West Regional Transit Authority, MWRTA.
And your colleague, I think, Jim, is coming, and I just admitted him from the waiting room. He's probably connecting. Jim, can you hear me and introduce yourself? Yeah, maybe he's not fully connected yet, so we can swing back around. All righty, so like I said, I will save the introductions for Aaron and, excuse me, can't see. Shravanti being on for right before the presentation. So next we're going to go to public comments. Do you see any, Stella? I don't. If you just raise your hand electronically, that would be great because we have the full screen up, so it's kind of hard to see if you're just raising your hand physically. Okay, I'm not seeing any public comments. So next we have approval of the March 13th minutes. And so, do we have a quorum, Stella?
Yep,
think-
I believe so.
Yeah, I thought so. So,
I
yes,
move that
John.
we approve the minutes.
Oh, wow, you're just right on this. I wasn't quite sure whether to ask for that first or to ask if people had questions, comments about that, but I'll take that motion. And can I get a second for the purpose of discussion?
I'll
Someone?
second.
Thank you. So, any discussion about the minutes, questions, corrections? Okay, so we have a motion by John McQueen and a second by Anna Christina to for Grossa to approve the minutes and we run the roll. Please, Stella.
All right, Len Diggins,
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes,
Anna Cristina Fragoso,
Yes,
and Fred Mosley.
Yes,
Great, that motion carries. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. And so now we're gonna to the headliner for the meeting, and that's the North Suffolk Freight Decarbonization Study, and Aaron McGuire and Shravanti Narayanan.
I can help you with that, Shravanti Gopalan Narayanan.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna need more help, but please forgive me for kind of slow on this one. And so I'll leave it to you two to introduce yourselves in whichever order you want. Okay.
Thank you, Len.
Sure.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erin McGuire. I am a transportation planner at the Boston Region MPO, and I am here today with Shravanti Gopalan Narayanan, and we will be discussing the findings from the Sustainability and Decarbonization in the Freight and Logistics Sector in the North Suffolk Area Discrete Study. Next slide, please. So this study was originally proposed by the City of Chelsea. Early in the development of the project scope, we identified that several of the challenges that Chelsea was experiencing were also relevant to its neighboring municipalities, and as a result, the scope was expanded to include Revere, Winthrop, East Boston, and Everett south of Route 16. Some major roadways that are located within the study area include routes 1A, 16, and 99, interstates 93 and 90, and the critical urban freight corridors of Marginal Street, Chelsea Street, Eastern Avenue, Beecham Street, 2nd Street, Broadway, and the Coughlin Bypass Road. There is a rail yard in service in Everett near the Mystic Mall, and there are 3 designated port areas in the study area, those being Chelsea Creek, the Boston Harbor, and Mystic River. We'll show pictures of those in the next slide. Approximately 158,000 people reside in the study area, of whom 60% identify as minorities and 30% have limited English proficiency. Next slide, please. For this study, we're defining freight as the transportation of bulk goods by truck, air, sea, or train, and the facilities that these vehicles operate out of. The airport is a major economic engine for the New England region. The goods that are transported through the airport are often time sensitive, which makes freight trucks the optimal vehicle to transport these goods with. The study area is composed of critical urban freight corridors, which are identified by MPOs in the state, and designated port areas, which are identified by the National Coastal Zone Management Program. There's a wide variety of product types that are being transported through the area. These can range from wholesale scrap metal to livery services to refrigerated food produce and distributions. Approximately 18,000 freight trips are generated daily in this study area, and they serve both local and regional markets. Next slide, please. Different types of light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles are best suited for different legs of a freight journey. As an example, step vans, which are classified as medium-duty vehicles, are well suited for deliveries to retail and direct-to-consumer trips. For long-haul trips, the majority of freight activity in Massachusetts is conducted through heavy-duty vehicles. As of 2019, 2.5% of all freight trips in Massachusetts were by rail. All this to be said, different strategies are needed to be considered for different characteristics of various freight transportation modes. Next slide. For this study, MPO staff engaged a variety of stakeholders to obtain input on current challenges in the area and promising potential decarbonization strategies that should be further explored. We met with municipalities, community-based organizations, and industry actors. The graphic on this slide summarizes the key themes that came up in these conversations and shows overlapping priorities between various actors. Next. So each type of stakeholder expressed concerns related to climate change, coastal flooding, and air quality. Next. Both municipalities and community-based organizations shared concerns around extreme temperatures, the safety of vulnerable roadway users, along with air and noise pollution. Municipalities and industry actors discussed the impact that decarbonization strategies may have on workforces, and also discussed opportunities to better support green jobs. And while both municipalities and industry actors are interested in making meaningful investments to support decarbonization, this only surfaced in our conversations with industry actors, where they expressed concern about the present cost of fleet electrification, but they did note that this is a challenge that is deeply affected by municipal fleets as well. Next slide. Through this study, we identified 3 main ongoing challenges that are experienced in the area as a result of our engagement activities, these being roadway conditions, noise and air pollution, and coastal flooding. We will expand on them in the next few slides. Next slide. The first major challenge that we identified is related to roadway condition, congestion, and safety. Routes 1, 1A, and 16 experience frequent congestion, where the traffic consists of freight trucks, delivery trucks, as well as local and through traffic. This contributes to bottlenecks, air and noise pollution, road deterioration, and vehicular idling. As a result of this, both cars and trucks take alternative routes through local and residential roads to bypass these congested areas. This not only deteriorates local roadway conditions, but can cause safety concerns for people walking, biking, and rolling in the area. Moreover, limited transit options force residents to drive or undertake challenging transit trips. Next slide. The second major challenge in the area relates to air quality, noise pollution, and extreme temperatures. The study area is densely populated and contains major clusters of environmental justice communities. Residents are disproportionately vulnerable to extreme heat due to the urban heat island effect and are exposed to emissions from roadways and the presence of industrial activities. This leads to public health concerns, such as a heightened risk of asthma. Advocates have requested limiting the expansion of industrial sites in this area. Next slide. And the final major challenge that we heard about is coastal flooding. Due to climate change, many freight and logistics hubs in the area are at risk of coastal flooding impacts. However, businesses have also expressed a desire to remain in their current location due to their proximity to the airport and other facilities. This means that actions must be taken in order to mitigate these extreme events. Many municipalities that we talked to have received municipal vulnerability preparedness program planning grants and are taking initial steps towards implementing action-oriented resilience plans. I am now going to hand this over to Shravanti, who will walk us through our recommendations and next steps.
Thanks, Erin. Hi, everyone. My name is Shravanti Gopalan Narayanan, and I'm the Freight Planning Program Manager at the Boston Region MPO. In addition to the ongoing challenges that Erin discussed, we also identified several decarbonization strategies based on our literature review and stakeholder engagement. Next slide, please. So the 4 key focus areas are electrification and alternate fuels, air quality reporting, mode shift, and coordination. Next slide. In Massachusetts, like nationwide, transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, and most of these emissions from the transportation sector come from passenger and light-duty vehicles. The Commonwealth has a goal for net zero emissions by 2050. Fleet electrification was the most commonly proposed strategy to accelerate decarbonization and to improve sustainability. However, several barriers were noted, such as high upfront cost, nascent technology, grid capacity, and vendor timelines. Many of our interviewees emphasized that fleet electrification is likely to be a long and complex process and may not address concerns associated with traffic, noise, or roadway conditions. So instead of putting all our eggs in the electrification basket, alternative fuels such as compressed natural gas, biodiesel, and hydrogen fuel cells can be explored and used. Next slide. Some of our stakeholders expressed an interest in having a more specific local air quality data reporting to enable the identification of the point sources of particulate matter. This information can be helpful to prioritize investments and develop regulations that could include emission caps, anti-idling enforcement, and low or no emission zones. Similarly, there is an interest in understanding the origins and destinations of truck traffic and the resulting impact of truck traffic flows on air quality. Next slide. There is ample evidence and widespread agreement that mode shift has several benefits, such as lower congestion and pollution, improved safety, and better public health. Providing necessary infrastructure will encourage mode shift for last-mile deliveries. Electric cargo bikes offer a promising alternative to step vans for local freight deliveries. This could potentially reduce the number of commercial vehicles that are parked in bike lanes, which is a safety concern that the MPO staff are currently studying through a separate discrete study. Stakeholders also encouraged us to facilitate intermodal freight connections by thinking outside the truck. Infrastructure to facilitate connections between truck, rail, and maritime freight is necessary to support this mode shift, as the closest intermodal rail facilities are in Worcester and Ayer. Everett has some of existing rail infrastructure, which needs to be preserved as it provides a unique opportunity to investigate shifting commodities and wholesale freight activities from rails to freight, from trucks to rail, sorry. Mode shift to rail freight could reduce the number of large freight vehicles that are on our roadways. Next slide, please. Owing to the widespread nature of freight sector, there is a need for increased coordination across local, regional, state, and national levels. Transportation and land use are closely connected and significantly impact one another. There is a possibility of a transportation and land use mismatch when freight patterns and zonings are not integrated in the planning and decision-making process. Any intensive regulation specific to the study area might have an impact on the future location or relocation of businesses in the study area and consequently on employment prospects. Next slide. So based on our findings from the study, we suggest two categories of next steps. The first one relates to follow-up studies that focus on specific promising ideas that emerged through the study, some of which we already are planning to pursue in the next federal fiscal year. The second strategy relates to regional efforts. One potential follow-up study would include the analysis of regional freight patterns to gain deeper insights on vehicle emissions. Another study could explore potential locations for charging infrastructure, which is being considered by MAPC, coordinating with the work of Electric Vehicle Information Coordinating Council. Finally, we recommend a study that could focus on assessing the feasibility of cargo e-bike deliveries, bike deliveries in the study area through a pilot program aimed at establishing a local delivery hub. On April 11th, the Unified Planning Work Program Committee voted to recommend a discrete study on this topic to be undertaken in the next federal fiscal year, that is 2025. In addition to these efforts, grants and funding opportunities are critical for stakeholders to advance freight decarbonization projects, provide improved infrastructure, and to stimulate economic development. Various funding programs relevant to freight and sustainability sector, both at federal and state level, include rebuilding American infrastructure with sustainability and equity race grant, Massachusetts Electric Vehicle Incentive Program, Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation Smart Grant, and the Industrial Rail Access Program are ripe for further exploration. Next slide, please. So we advocate for broader regional efforts that build on interdisciplinary coalition of stakeholders to collaboratively pursue decarbonization strategies, such as a regional freight decarbonization action plan. We also encourage setting regional greenhouse gas emission targets, reduction targets, and working collectively towards achieving them. Further exploration of a multimodal approach by combining the movement of freight across ship, rail, and truck transport is an important regional effort. Finally, we want to emphasize the necessity of continuing public engagement efforts to create awareness and educate public about decarbonization strategies. Next slide, please. This study would not have been possible without the help of several other MPO staff, especially Stella Jordan and Sean Rook from our communications and engagement team, Alison Felix and Travis Pollock from MAPC, and numerous other stakeholders who shared their valuable time and thoughts with us. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of them. And thank you so much for your attention, and we will open the floor for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, I'll open it up for questions. Stella, you're fine with dropping the screen and then going back to it quickly if we need to? Great, thank you. So, well, I'm glad we dropped it. We got the applause from John McQueen and John. I just know you want to ask first question, so it's all yours.
Hi. Very, very well done. Thank you. Critical issue. I guess going down to the smaller aspect, I guess it's smaller, the more localized, the e-bikes and cargo bikes, and getting into the micro transit type of last mile. Did you factor in to the feasibility or the local impacts of the competitors, I guess, or their shared users, road users of the mini bikes, Vespas, things like that are being used they're being proliferated really by DoorDash, Grubhub, things like that. That's been well written about in local media and has generated a lot of concern. Does that impact a real feasibility, let's say, for including an increase of cargo bikes being able to do local deliveries? And I would assume that would be replacing some of those step vans of Amazon and UPS and things like that. So there'd need to be many more cargo bikes. So that tells me that with normal travel, let's say transportation levels, vehicle levels, that there's going to be more congestion and probably more an impact on safety, roadway and pedestrian safety. Have you factored that into that part of the recommendation?
Thank you for that question, John. So, as we just discussed, this particular project mostly focuses on the decarbonization strategies and the challenges. And as I mentioned in the presentation, we are planning to do a study on cargo e-bikes in our next federal fiscal year as a UPWP study. So this is probably something that will be included as part of that study. But to answer your question, currently, City of Boston is doing a pilot program. It is basically cargo e-bikes used to deliver. It's basically using cargo e-bikes for food deliveries in specific. So they are doing that pilot, which runs till December of this year. So I'm hoping that we can take some takeaways from them. And I do know that in terms of, you mentioned about sharing curb space and that e-cargo bikes could potentially add more, traffic on the roads and safety concerns. So in terms of impact of, impact of these kind of vehicles versus step vans on vulnerable road users, I can assure you that it is pretty evident that the impact is much lesser when it is a cargo e-bike, and they also have speed restrictions on some of these bikes. So there is only certain speed limits that they can go up to. But I again, this study did not focus on that, but I'm hoping that Boston Delivers pilot program could get us more information about that. And hopefully when we start working on the UPWP study next federal fiscal year, we can look into those considerations and see how feasible they are.
Can you please elaborate on the pilot?
Sure. So this pilot program that I just mentioned is by City of Boston. So they are collaborating with Net Zero Logistics to do food deliveries using cargo e-bikes. I can probably quickly drop a link in the chat about this pilot program so that you can take a look into that. Let's see.
I just found it and dropped the link in the chat.
Thank you so much, Stella. Thank you.
Thanks, Stella.
All right. Thank you, John.
Yep.
AC?
Yes, real quick, what brought it to mind was when you talked about the coastal flooding and that a lot of businesses didn't want to change and that you're studying various mitigation. Is that what you said, correct?
Right.
What I'm wondering is, as you do this, and as you're looking at the freight traffic overall, whether it's increasing or how you're going to manage it, if you have a variable that includes like emergency services, like someone that needs, an ambulance needs to get somewhere, is it going to impact them in any way? Like how are you routing this?
Do you mean rerouting during coastal risk?
Or yes, or if you're counting that while you're doing these traffic studies, if you're considering emergency management.
Right, yes. So we do have a coastal resilience program at the MPO, and as part of the program, we've been identifying critical links, especially in the Boston metropolitan area. So that analysis gives us an idea of where the critical links are. But since I'm not the program manager of that program, I cannot go into the details. I may not be the best person to talk about the details of it, but yes, we do have that on our radar, and we have started thinking about that as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for
maybe get someone to talk with us about that, AC. Good questions. Olgan?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron and Shravanti, for the presentation. It was really interesting. And my question was kind of about the engagement that you did as part of the study. I think AC picked up on this as well too, which is also another interesting point. But it was interesting to hear that the industries were kind of aware of the climate impacts that were coming to the region, but they were still kind of committed to staying in the area because of the the access that is already there. It's the airport and other facilities. So I was wondering, like, when you were doing this engagement, were you talking with any industries that have already started to like adjust to the potential impacts of climate change in the area, like, I don't know, raising their facilities or like trying to like, I know like Amazon's thing is like trying to move to a bunch of electric delivery vehicles. So yeah, I'm just interested if you have any more details on that.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, Amazon did bring up their electric delivery vehicles. Other businesses that we talked to were discussing the feasibility of converting their warehouse spaces and the facilities that these trucks operate out of, and really enhancing the capacity to do like vehicular recharging and things to really support the electrification. There were challenges with vehicle procurement that were discussed a lot about actually being able to get an electric vehicle on a relatively short timeline, and the market not quite being at a stable place for that yet.
That's interesting. You know, so are you set, Logan? Okay, Jim?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to make one quick note. One of the grant programs that was mentioned was the Strengthening Mobility SMART grant program through USDOT. It's a wonderful grant program. The MWRTA is thankfully a phase 1 recipient of that grant from 2 years ago. It's a 5-year program from the bipartisan infrastructure law. The only note that I wanted to bring up about that, though, was this summer is the last year they're accepting phase 1 applicants. So if that were to be applied for, if anyone's interested in that for any type of program related to this, this summer is the time to do it, because after that, they will not be accepting phase 2 applicants. Or sorry, phase 1 applicants, and phase 2 is only for phase 1 applicants.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Good to know. Yeah, so I'm going to ask a bunch of questions, but at any point that someone raises their hand, I'll just stop, my questions and take yours, So kind of follow up on a little bit of what Logan was asking, a little bit different direction. So I noticed that you had spoken with about 6 businesses. Like what percentage of business do they do in the study area? Just approximately, approximately, just kind of magnitude level, 5%, 20%, 1%.
That's a good question. Unfortunately, we didn't look into it specifically. I will say that, for example, we did talk to Amazon, which obviously has a large delivery base. We also were talking to organizations that work very closely with the Logan Airport, and talking about sort of their coordination needs and how they get bulk goods from their facilities over to the airport on a consistent basis.
Right. I mean, and that question can be sliced up in a number of ways. It's like, what volume they do, and then what number, like how many businesses, how many freight businesses are we talking about there, or how many businesses that utilize freight, or part of the freight issue, are down there. So and even without knowing what percentage there are, it'd be interesting to know, like, we have like we have the dollar volume, kind of. We have the traffic volume, kind of, through the TDM, the travel demand model. But I don't know if we have like the number of businesses. And then the numbers kind of, I'm interested in that, because sometimes if you kind of like get a critical mass of the number of businesses participating in a program, you can get a lot more momentum with it. So that's why I'm asking, So now I'm more of a little historical question that maybe I should have a better handle on. Did the industry come first, or the people living down there, or in that area, come first? So were people living there first, and then the industry really moved in and became an issue? Or was it like, there was industry first, and then there are like these pockets of undeveloped areas where we then develop some housing, and now we have housing in a place where it's mostly industry?
I'm guessing that there has been, so it's because of the access to ports, there might have been industrial settlements from the beginning, but people might have also lived there. But then over time, as the businesses disappear. There might have been more newer businesses established in the same place. That's what
Right.
I'm expecting it to be, but I
Right.
guess we'll have to dig up the history a little bit to
Yeah.
come up with like the correct information.
Right, and I hear you. I mean, and I asked this in the context. I mean, I guess there was a little discussion about how I guess there were some tanks, maybe fuel tanks that were no longer being used, and they're going to replace them and perhaps do some housing or some mixed development. And much along the lines that we try to encourage more density in the urban area, because not only does it require less travel, but the deal is to kind of decrease the sprawl, so that you are able to preserve, more green space, so you kind of concentrate the urban space, so you can conserve the green space. I'm kind of thinking, well, maybe it would be good, to kind of concentrate, freight more while still having nodes, where you can do the last mile stuff, but this is more of a MAPC thing, I think, than a MPO thing. Although, as we all know, transportation is what matters first. So the transportation network that you have really determines what else you're going to do with that land. All right, so with the California case study, they had this point system. Do you know if there was like any enforcement or reward mechanism for the point system? It wasn't like a trading cap situation, right? The points were maybe there to help people gauge how well they were making the target, or what?
My understanding is that the point system was a way to offset some fees that would be incurred on these point sources. So
Okay.
businesses had the opportunity to choose a couple mitigation activities to reduce whatever that fee would be. And there was
Okay.
also an alternative option for them where they can create their own sort of specific plan to go
Right.
around the fees.
Right.
Definitely a lot of administration there.
Yeah, no, it's interesting though. I mean, I like it. In fact, maybe I missed that the second time I read it, because when you mentioned the fees, it's like, yeah, I kind of remember thinking that, So, but yeah, this administration, but it does kind of create like a nice incentive structure, and the thing about administrative elements is that it can be really challenging to set it up. But if you set it up well, then it can kind of run itself, and there are efficiencies that you get from the administrative element of it, or let me rephrase this, you can achieve goals with some administration, then if you don't have it, you just kind of leave people on their own. All right, so it was nice to see. Oh, John, your hand came up, so I'm gonna keep to what I said. Go ahead.
Okay, let me lower the hand. To what degree is the charge charging station availability, the length of battery life, let's say for miles per charge, and or the upcharge? There is an upcharge for a electrified vehicle versus a gas-powered vehicle. How much are those factors of weighing into the current adoption of the kinds of goals that you're going to have right now in terms of the number of electrified vehicles in play, and for that cap system that Lynn was talking about, was that factored in to kind of lower the adoption costs, let's say, for a major supplier, let's say a freight supplier company, Schneider or somebody like that?
I don't know who's going to take that, but I will say that it was a point system, and I kind of equated it to a cap system, but it's not a cap system as far as I can tell.
Okay.
Yeah.
But for any kind of system that out in California, was it also linked to something that would lower the cost, let's say, of those? Or was it also linked to a greater availability of charging stations? Just overcoming some of the obstacles, let's say, for a company to make a switch now, let's say, versus later, 5-10 years later.
So I would say that the WARE system is what the California system is that we're referring to. I'm putting an informational fact sheet in the chat. This is essentially a system designed to get at point source pollution and addressing those aspects. So it unfortunately does not really touch on the cost of electrification or electrification infrastructure. The largest barriers that we have noticed have been the market supply for these electric vehicles, having that as a consistent timeline and time frame that can be implemented by these businesses and municipalities. And then also one challenge that is experienced when trying to get infrastructure on to say interstate systems or some of the more federally owned areas, those are not allowed to have like for-profit charging stations there. So that means that they have to look elsewhere beyond the interstate system to really site these electric vehicle charging stations, which is one regulation that would have to be really looked at.
So that's huge, isn't it? Huge.
Yes.
I mean, the
Yeah, to say the
availability of fuel, that kind of fuel at will, let's say, and then also what is the length of time of charging a battery sufficient to power an 18-wheeler? You know, so there are a lot of, let's say, technical issues as well as operational issues that are real embedded obstacles, I guess. Is that correct?
Yes, I will say there is some relatively positive news coming from the federal DOT system. They, right as we finished drafting this recommendation, they had released a action plan, I believe, to reach or to achieve a net zero electric vehicle capacity network specifically for our freight systems. So this would involve identifying key areas throughout the entire country that are larger freight hubs, and then working from there to build out and to connect those. So there's at least a national strategy developing to support this, and I'll also get info sent your way there.
What is their best case and worst case timelines?
All of these are looking out to about 2050 for development.
That's their best case, right?
Yeah.
We have two other hands up. So we're going to go to Logan and then Andy.
Yeah.
Logan?
Thank you. One of these, this is a more kind of out there question, but one of the interesting things I thought that came from the study was one of the challenges you noted was the lack of, available rail facilities to kind of support, a logical like transition from kind of trucks to rail. And it's interesting, kind of outside of the study zone, we're looking at, like the Alston multimodal right now, where we're about to completely redevelop an inactive rail yard. So I'm wondering if you guys looked at kind of, other inactive rail yards like within the Boston region as part of the study that might have been outside the area. And then also did you guys talk about like electrification of, the existing lines and like how, realistic it might be, if rail was kind of the future of freight, with the existing infrastructure, would it be possible or would it, require a significant amount of investment?
So I can start, and Erin, please feel free to add to this. So one challenge in terms of, when we talk about like the rail corridors, like the existing ones, is that some of them might be private, so they might be like owned by the businesses. So willingness of the interest by the business to use those rail corridors might be a factor. So to answer your first part of the question, we did look into like the rail yards within the region and thinking about the possibilities of, which ones are still like, existing and which ones are no longer existing. We did briefly talk about that. And that's when we came to know that the nearest ones are intermodal facilities are in like Worcester and Ayer. So that could be a challenge depending on from where to where are the goods going. So that's one major, like what is the origin and destination? Is it possible for us to like get that buy-in? Like there are so many factors that need to be considered But we just, as part of this study, we wanted to like at least, recognize that that is one of the possibilities. Aaron,
Thanks.
please feel free to add to it.
Well, thanks. Again, being former members of CTPS always ask interesting questions. So Andy, you're gonna keep that trend going, right?
I guess so.
All right.
So I, just kind of reading through the memo and just kind of hearing in the presentation, I'm not seeing that industry is very kind of interested in reducing vehicle miles traveled. I think they imagine that to be a pretty significant challenge. I'm wondering how much that may have come up in other kind of stakeholders though, because I think a lot of our decarbonization efforts, people think of, we just need to get rid of gas and diesel vehicles. And we won't actually get to our goals in 2050 if we don't actually reduce vehicle miles traveled, either on a per person or economy-wide basis, right? So everything requires some level of either we have to use our miles more efficiently or we have to stop using those miles, right? It's, again, that kind of problem. So obviously, I don't think industry is ready for that conversation, right? I think Logan brought up the issue of cross-modal, transfer points in the inner core. There are none, right? Obviously, that's a challenge, especially if, you're trying to do airport to, land-based transport. That's pretty challenging. But did it come up for the other stakeholders? I'm kind of wondering who are the folks that are thinking about this and continue to think about how the freight piece could have a reduction in vehicle miles traveled.
So we didn't hear specifically about vehicle miles traveled and reducing those. Instead, we heard a lot from our advocates and municipalities about roadway safety and really protecting the people that are on these residential streets. That by far was one of the strongest 3 points that we had observed. And that's how we landed on the e-cargo bike study and trying to figure out how we can try to reduce these conflict points on these local streets where we might be able to have an impact.
I guess just as a follow-up, do we think that helps us? I'm sure it helps us meet the kind of vehicle miles reductions that we're looking for, but if that does scale, does that scale in the amount of VMT reduction that we need? That's kind of my question. Like if we take the, back of napkin calculations, do we get close or do we need to think beyond just the last mile is my question.
That's a good question. And I think that's something we should carry forward with us into our next study here. Because it does get into the bigger issues of how much impact can we actually have.
Especially if people want to sell more stuff. And so businesses want to sell more stuff. So we're kind of fighting that battle. And so if they want to sell more stuff, then we need to move more stuff. And so we do have to get more efficient, but we can only drive efficiency so far if they're growing. Sorry about stepping in front of you there, Casey.
No, that's okay. Really quickly, kind of going off of what Andy and Sean were both going on, but I'm assuming the majority of the study, you're talking about businesses that have an economy of scale. I mean, they're like the Home Depots and the larger, companies that need to move stuff around. Or what happens when you remove them from the equation and just focus on smaller local businesses? Have you looked at that?
As part of the study, we only focused on the larger freight-related industries. So we did not go into that level of detail. But for e-cargo bikes, it could be different because there the focus might be different because it's only focusing on like the last mile delivery. It could probably only focus on the final last mile delivery.
Okay.
And thank you, AC. Harkening back to something that Logan had mentioned earlier about the businesses wanting to stay. I also noticed that he said in conversation, he said that scheduling and operation policies often account for congestion delays in practice. They said they would work to improve efficiencies by adjusting employee schedules and scheduling deliverables during non-peak hours. So that really seems to be the key, or a big factor in helping to reduce congestion. And if a lot of the businesses down there are willing to do that. And I think now would be a good time for us to try to do that. I mean, one of the problems we were seeing before the pandemic was we were having these big, bulges during the rush hours, which were of course then beginning to expand out. But the pandemic did kind of stretch things out a bit, or at least decrease the peak a bit. And it'd be good to see if we could maybe develop some policies, meanwhile, or encourage businesses to do a more scheduling to help to reduce the congestion to the extent there's a correlation between congestion and air pollution. And that would be good. I mean, it might be less air pollution the more we go towards electric, wasting time. I mean, if they are in their cars driving, unless we get to AVs and they can do other stuff with them while they're in their vehicles, So, and also I noticed that you mentioned the study that was done back in 2016, and going to go back and look at that some more. I was happy to see mention of that in references to previous studies, and maybe I might grab about 5 minutes from something on some other things on the agenda to talk about how we can follow up on this as the advisory council. John.
Hi, just a kind of a reality check and logistics check. If the cargo bikes are to replace, let's say, the Amazon size or the UPS size step vans locally making their deliveries, how many e-bikes would it take to replace the cargo load per day of, let's say, an Amazon truck? I mean, what are we replacing here in terms of just delivery availability? I mean, how many
Right.
is it going to be one for one, or is it no? It's you're gonna have 20 or so.
So we still need to do a lot of research, but based on my exposure to the pilot program that have been done in like Seattle and New York City, there are like different types of trailers that can be attached to cargo e-bikes. So depending on the size of the parcels, they will be categorized and they will be combined. The trips will be combined based on the destination and the size of the package. And these are going to be like the considerations for combining trips and determining the number of trips that can be done in a day. And the other thing is there's also going to be considerations on battery capacity and various other ways of doing it. So, but again, like we need to do a little bit of research on that before we could like get you those numbers. So hopefully next year when we start working on the cargo e-bike study, I think we will be in a better place to answer that question.
Because what I'm seeing is based on what I get delivered by Amazon. Yeah, some of it could be replaced or put into an e-bike, cargo bike, but some of the others aren't going to be able to at all. I mean, the load is too heavy even for maybe one bike. So I mean, you're still going to have the step vans out there in addition to the e-bikes, the cargo bikes.
I'm sending a link in the chat that has that's from Urban Freight Lab, which is based in Seattle. So since you're curious about like the cargo e-bikes, you can take a look at that to get a sense of the types of trailers that they have and the analysis that they did. But I'm hoping that we will be in a better place next year when we get to do the research for our region.
Wow, John, with all you're buying from Amazon, I hope you're buying their stock too, So anyways, so I think that's going to wrap it up for this. So thank you so much, for following up, for coming to talk with us, on study. As you know, I mean, it's really great for the advisory council to get more time on the UPWP studies. So this was, I think, time well spent. And so the time I want to grab in, and I hope it's okay for me to discuss this, because it's not specifically on the agenda, but we had talked about it in previous meetings, like how do we track, the results of the studies. And so as I was reading this, I was thinking, okay, so how do I maybe put this into a spreadsheet and track at least the suggestions, recommendations, and so if anyone has any ideas, that's fine. I have some ideas. I'm just going to try it in spreadsheet form first. The nice thing about the reference to the 2016 study is going to give me incentive to go to that study and pull out its recommendations and then see how they may map to other things. But my point is that rather than telling staff this is something they should do, I think it's going to be good for the advisory council just to take this on, and try and do it ourselves. That way we can create the kind of tracking that we want. And then if any other entity, be it staff or someone else, goes, well, that's a good idea, and I think I can do it better. Go for it. So I'll put this on the agenda maybe for next month, or September, but definitely want to try and get this thing that we've been wanting to do off the ground, but with us doing it. So that's that. No, I'm not going to open that box and say anything else. I'm going to move on. So thank you once again. And we're going to move on to something that has me very excited. Yes, okay. Yeah. And that's an update, maybe an update / introduction of the engagement education program plans. And that's going to be by Stella and Jia Hung. Or
Wow.
Stella Jordan and Jia Hung, not one last name there. So
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gia, and as mentioned, I'm the Public Engagement Coordinator at the Boston Region MPO. We're excited to present an update about the MPO education program and to gather your comments and feedback about it today. And I'm going to pass it to Stella for introductions.
Thanks, Gia. Just echoing Gia, we're really excited to bring this conversation to this space and this group, and give you all a taste of what we're planning. So to get us started, I'll just talk a bit about the background and kind of where this idea came from. So educational programs like this, also sometimes referred to as civic academies, have become a really popular tool in recent years for public agencies of all types, including local, regional, and state government, and particularly agencies that are involved in planning work like us, to really build the public's capacity to effectively engage with planning processes. So as we've developed and deepened our own public engagement program and practice over the last couple of years, we've done a lot of research on what peers are doing, and we've actually come across several examples of other MPOs deploying these types of programs really as kind of innovative strategies to address the underrepresentation of certain communities and barriers that these communities may face to participating in the planning process as it's structured. It can be, as I'm sure you all know, quite complicated to sort of dive into. And then I also want to just give a quick shout out and thank you to Len for really encouraging us to continue kind of digging into this idea. Len, I think when I first started or shortly after working with RTAC, you really highlighted some of these peer examples to me, and it really kind of kicked off us digging into this more. So want to share some of the credit for the idea there. Thank you for the encouragement along the way. And sort of another just element of background to mention, a really key component of these types of programs that we've seen in our research is cultivating peer learning and sharing experiences where both staff and participants can learn from each other. So it's really a two-way street, and it's a space for participants to gain a deeper knowledge base, but also to share community perspectives and expertise with us and build capacity to identify effective actions and ways to engage. And I'll turn it back over to Gia to dig into the research that we've done a bit more.
As we started developing the pilot program, we looked to our peers who have facilitated similar programs to learn about best practices, successes, and challenges. We had the opportunity to talk to staff from the Greater Portland Council governments and Metropolitan Washington Council governments about their unique programs and ask their advice about kickstarting a pilot. These discussions were informative and they gave us a better understanding of program development and facilitation. We also looked at project websites and publications, which provided us with greater insight into developing goals, curriculum, and evaluation metrics. In terms of best practices, we found that hands-on activities and bringing in local and real-world contexts can help sustain participation and meaningful engagement. For example, in our discussion with Metropolitan Washington, we learned about a role-playing activity where participants assume the role of various transportation stakeholders. The goal of the activity is to provide participants with a practical understanding of the different roles, the process, and the challenges of competing priorities and funding in the planning process. We're excited to plan for more creative activities such as this role-playing exercise and to take a spin on some of them to include a greater Boston region context. Next slide, please. There was a wealth of resources on education programs and their successful role in support engagement. From our research, we found some successes and benefits, including increased public participation, more effective participation as a result of more informed stakeholders, and more buy-in to the planning process. By equipping participants with the knowledge and skills to understand the transportation planning process, they can feel empowered to advocate for meaningful changes in and with their communities. We included a quote here by Donna J. Carney, who facilitated the Community Planning Institute in the city of Philadelphia, which captures the significance of education programs to our engagement goals. It reads, "The relationships that are built between residents and stakeholders in the program represent the long game in creating a more informed and diverse constituency." This statement resonated with much of the findings from our peer research and our initial goals to develop an MPO education program. The development of the pilot will require investment of time and resources, but the opportunity to a more meaningful engagement with our communities and stakeholders is far-reaching. Next slide, please. We are calling our program the Community Planning Lab. We floated other names during the planning phase and feel that this name best captures our goals. But like other aspects of this pilot, it's still subject to change in the future. The purpose and the vision of the program is to build the public's capacity to engage in the transportation planning process. While the core purpose of education programs is to inform, we also hope to provide participants with useful skills and tools to empower them to advocate for change. We hope to engage stakeholders and communities whose voices are currently underrepresented in MPO's work and addressing barriers to engagement. One way we are addressing these barriers is by providing stipends for participants' time and participation. And throughout our engagement work, we've heard from peer agencies that paying stakeholders for their time is an equitable practice that can help amplify underrepresented voices in the planning process. Building a more engaged community of local advocates can help support a transportation system that reflects the needs and priorities of diverse transportation users. Additionally, the pilot program offers staff an opportunity to develop and test new engagement strategies for future iterations of the program and other engagement efforts. Next slide, please. In pursuing the pilot program, we hope to provide a meaningful way for the public to engage with the MPO's work by building better community relationships with a diverse constituency of advocates. The pilot program will help staff improve strategic planning and effectiveness evaluation efforts within the public engagement program by testing out new engagement methods and working with participants to engage with the MPO's work to intentionally shape outcomes. We will use the pilot program and the feedback received from the pilot cohort and staff to support the development of a broader program in future years. Additionally, we hope the program will serve as a pipeline for new RTAC members. We will encourage program alumni to bring their hands-on experience and technical knowledge they gain throughout the program into the advisory council and other forums for advocating about transportation and engaging with the planning process. Next slide, please. We are planning to launch the pilot program this September. It will be a 1 to 2 day intensive programming held at the State Transportation Building. Our target cohort will include 5 members affiliated with community-based organizations who are not currently represented in NPO's work. Additionally, we plan to provide stipends for each participant for their time and expertise. This pilot will serve as a learning experience to develop a broader program within the NPO's public engagement program in future years, as staff and participants gain a greater understanding of successes and opportunities for improvement. And while the wealth of information and resources shared during our peer review will not be feasible to implement during this pilot, we are archiving strategies to build up future iterations of the program. A key consideration for future iterations of the program includes collaboration with community-based organizations and planning institutions to develop program materials. For example, our peer agency in Baltimore collaborated with State's Art College to develop a board game to reflect the transportation decision-making process. We were inspired by these types of community partnerships, and it will be critical as we further develop relationships. Next slide, please. Slide outlines the development progress of the pilot program. We are presenting our findings and sharing the plans for the pilot with you all today, but have been conducting peer agency research throughout this past spring. In the next few months, we will be solidifying program details, such as inviting members, developing program materials, and finalizing logistics before presenting an update to the NPO board. And as mentioned before, we're planning to launch the pilot program this September. Next slide, please.
Awesome. Thank you, Gia, for that overview. And thank you all members for listening. We're really excited to hear your thoughts on the progress and plans for this program so far. And we've outlined a few questions here. We really welcome your feedback, but I'll just read them off quickly to get us started. So curious to hear what key information about the NPO or participation in regional planning should we include in this pilot or in future iterations, and kind of to dig in on that a little bit based on your own experience engaging in the planning process, as many of you have been doing for a long time. What type of content and education has been the most helpful to you to really be able to understand the NPO's work and where the NPO sits in the context of regional and broader transportation planning? Were there specific resources, et cetera, that really helped you that we could deploy here in this type of program? What metrics do you suggest we look at to measure the success of the program? What would ideal outcomes look like? And finally, what elements would you like to see in future years as we look at expanding beyond the pilot? So I'll turn it back over to you, Len.
All right, thank you.
John's hand up.
Yes, thank you. And these are good questions, and I will think about them a lot and get back to you, I think, with some more detailed responses. There's some things I want to go back and look at, mentioned in the presentation. So John, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we're going to keep it a little tight on the question, all right?
Sure.
Okay, great.
In terms of those work groups, are those going to get problems or case histories put before them? Or, for instance, community connections or some other issue like that for them to solve or opine on within their own, that impacts their own community?
Are you talking about just for the pilot cohort? Yeah, that's a really good idea. We're still developing the specific content for the curriculum, but I think we really want to make it interactive and tangible in terms of people being able to actually experience how the planning process works. So I think deploying things that relate to real world examples of problems that we face in our process is definitely a good idea.
Okay.
I think it's just anything, John, and maybe we'll put answering these questions or just continuous discussion as a part of next month's agenda. But in the meantime, John, I would say, suggest anything you want to Stella and Gia on your own. You don't have to get group approval to respond to these questions whenever you want. Andy?
Yeah. So I'm glad that you all are piloting something. This is actually, I think, a good concept to see what could help make sure that the MPO's kind of efforts to include people, don't just rely on people kind of trying to figure out their own strengths by themselves, but that you all are helping them gain some information and knowledge that can help them build upon strengths they already have, right? So I think there's a lot of jargon and acronyms and so many different names for programs. And, especially once you get into the federal funding world, it's so hard even for myself as somebody who works on trying to find grants for cities to just remember which program is which, especially after the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's just so many things that have come down the pipeline. So whatever you can do to keep a catalog, a glossary, and as much as you can define things in as plain language as possible will be helpful, probably even for this group. So I would definitely make that plug to try to make, continue to make efforts as new programs pop up as well. I am maybe taking a little bit of a step back in terms of just how to define some success. I think that success may be just that they can engage with one meeting, right? Like if it's just kind of a limited intervention, right? That they decide themselves to go to one MPO, one regional kind of transportation or MassDOT meeting, right? Like maybe that's the realm, but that, it might be as simple as that, and that they understand what that's going on at that meeting and can, figure out for themselves whether they want to make a comment or, other things like that. Like, I think if you are able to bring in even just 5 people who go from like not understanding what all of these agencies are, how they work together, what programs they work on, how things get funded, to being comfortable to actually understand what's going on in a meeting, that would be huge in terms of an education. So it could be something as simple as that. Somebody is just confident enough to go into a meeting and just observe. Because honestly, I think a lot of these efforts where I've seen them fail is in not really focusing on helping people develop on their own strengths that they already have. That in some ways it's like, here's a checklist that you should do, instead of helping them kind of build upon their own capacities. So, the orientation being maybe trying to help people build upon their strengths probably fits that better. And, a proof of that would just be they showed up, they understood. That's huge. 10, 20 years down the road, who knows? They may be Len in Len's role today because they had that first experience, right? But if they're kind of scared off from the get, they won't even be able to, have that as a potential future. So those are some just thoughts on your questions here.
I like that idea. Maybe like see what topics are coming up in the next month or two of meetings, and potentially discuss those. At the 1 or 2 day meetings with the not with the hope, but with the expectation, that they will attend the meeting, and pose a question, and they can either pose that question at the meeting or an advisory council meeting. I have more ideas, but I'm not going to step in front of Logan any more than I have. Logan?
Thank you, Len, and thank you, Stella, and Gia, for the presentation as well too. I'm really excited to see how this program develops, and I think the idea of including stipends as well too is going to be game changing to the types of engagement and input we get. I think just having more people in the conversation that maybe just can't volunteer their time is something that's going to make a real great change. But my first couple of comments are mostly actually what kind of Andy has already said. So I just think in general, like the terminology the MPO uses is really jargony. It would be helpful to kind of create, a quick lookup sheet. I know from working at the MPO, I know we have an internal sheet, so I don't know if that's something that could be made public eventually, but I found that very useful during my time working at the MPO. The jargony part, I think, is a little harder to learn, but I think, a really important core aspect to this should be kind of teaching the structure of how state, federal, and regional funding is kind of allocated and, the process the MPO plays in it. I think, highlighting are, it's a fine line between, really getting into the fine details about our, like the core products the MPO puts out, like the TIP and the UPWP. But, maybe highlighting, specific engagement points where, the input, will go the farthest. And, they have, they're not just showing up to, any meeting that the MPO is having, but, when, they're interested in kind of having these comments, they know when those comments are kind of be accepted and, considered to their full force. Some other points, I think highlighting some of the past work and engagement the MPO has done could be interesting to kind of engage people with and get them in the know on kind of what the MPO has done in the past, what we're capable of doing potentially in the future. And to that point as well, too, I just think including as much data as the MPO might have to kind of present about, like what type of projects we have done, what our, long range plan is looking to do, even data about like which municipalities are involved and like actively like getting projects with the MPO and maybe ones that aren't involved and maybe should be more involved. What I think would be probably helpful to, those who are going to be involved with community engagement for the MPO. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you.
So my suggestion with respect to the groups that you reach out to would be groups that would potentially be interested in joining the advisory council. And so you get members from those groups to participate in the pilot. That would be really good, and I don't think it's I can't step on the bylaws. Bylaws says that they have to, I think, attend like 3 meetings in a row, but maybe we could like say, well, the attendance fee in the pilot would count for one of the meetings. But like I said, I don't know how many groups are going to be interested, in doing this, but we could certainly say, look, it may be really good if you are interested, in pursuing this for the long term. And to back up to the slide where there was that quote, it said that this represents the long game. It only represents the long game to the extent that we also make it clear that we have a long-term commitment to this program and to the people that participate in it. So it'd be good to find people that really do want to keep doing it. They may change their mind, but at least initially, they are thinking this is something that I want to pursue, but yeah. Yeah, and I was going to say, but I guess it could be like a diversity of people who are just kind of curious. But I think we could create like another venue for people who are simply curious. So this doesn't have to be the limit of public engagement, as you very well know, because you do lots of different kinds of engagement, Gia and Stella. So yeah, I will think more about all these questions and we can discuss the extent to which we can maybe have a little more discussion about this at next month's meeting, if that's not too late for you, because you don't have a few months to get this thing going before September. So we're like 3 months, and August is one of those months where it's kind of hard to get anything done. So it's might even be less time than you think. So we'll, like I said, to John, if people have feedback that they want to give to Stella and Gia before the next meeting, please by all means do so. John.
Yeah, hi. I guess I would suggest if there were going to be multiple sessions for these core groups, that in one of them, let's say they get presented a major segment, let's say, of our planning, which let's say is complete streets, and give them maybe a situation, kind of a real world situation for them to let's say, but opine on and try and solve the problem, and then have experts come in and talk with them on that thing and how to what aspects are really involved in creating a complete street, and what agencies, and just something real world and maybe tangible to their own neighborhood, and something that they can solve or feel that they can make an impact. Okay, and that they get listened to. So,
yes.
Okay, just
yeah. Yeah, like let's have them solve the problem. Like we have a project that's 25% design, and when it gets to 75% design, it now costs like twice as much we thought it was going to cost me. That'd be a good
Yeah.
to solve.
Well,
So,
but I mean,
so,
there's a bit of reality, but then there's also imagination and resourcefulness that they can perhaps pull from, plus their own experience.
One of
it's a
the
big,
oh sorry,
no,
I
no,
was
no,
just going to say one of the examples that we looked at from, I think it was the DC MPO, they incorporated something similar to what you're talking about, I think, John, where they had like a role-playing game. I think Gia alluded to it in her slides, but they had participants basically like play different types of stakeholders, like talking about and trying to solve a problem around a project. So you had people who are like on the advocacy side, MPO staff, DOT staff, and actually I think what they did was have the participants be on the like play planners, and the planners play like the staff who are involved play like advocates and just people in the public trying to engage. So kind of flipping the script and having everyone sort of game out like what it actually feels like to engage in this way with actually a real project that was going on. So I definitely think that's something that we would want to try to replicate in some way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm just getting so excited talking about this, so I'm so happy this is moving. And once again, the extent to which being the advisory council can help out anyway with respect to the planning or on those 2 days, that's fine. I'm just gonna sign up everyone, on the advisory council to participate in this. And so we'll get what we get. And last comments, before moving on to talking about August field trip. All right. Well, let's talk.
I really appreciate everyone's feedback, and I'm gonna drop my email. I'm just totally happy, as Lynn said, like, please feel free to email us any other thoughts that you have. Happy to continue the conversation offline. And we will keep you all posted. It would be great to be able to get everyone together with the new cohort as well, and have a meet and greet at some point. But yeah, we're really excited to continue this work. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so let's talk about August, because the plan is not to have a meeting in August, but to go someplace if folks want to go someplace. So if you have any ideas, feel free to voice them. I think one idea that Stella and I bounced around is maybe see if we can go to the Operation Control Center for the MBTA. If you haven't been there, it's a pretty impressive place. If you have been there, you probably might want to see it again. It's been a while since I've seen it. But if people have anything else in mind, you can discuss it now, or we discuss it at the July meeting. And the nice thing about the field trips is that I won't say it's a nice thing. One aspect of the field trips is that they can occur on days and times other than our normal meeting date and time. And so that's something to take into account, and I guess since we don't normally have meetings in August, if we wanted to do an in-person meeting in August, that could be the field trip, where we take a field trip to the State Transportation Building, and hang out there, and still have a hybrid, remote aspects to that. People who want to join us remotely can. So I just put that out there. So yeah. I know this is coming out of the blue for folks, so I'm not expecting a whole lot of interaction now, but just want to put that out there, and so we'll discuss this a little bit more in July. And once again, we don't have to do anything. If folks just want to take it easy, in August, and relax, that's fine too. I can give you reading material in case you really want to engage in this, which would be to finish reading the needs assessment for September, because that's what I'm going to do. All righty, I'm not seeing any hands up. I'm going to move on to the chair's report. And I just have one big thing two actually. So the two things is Fred Mosley and I ended up putting in a letter on the UPWP. We would have had a quorum, but I think Anna Christina we had something come up. And so did Franny, and so it was just Fred and myself. But as I said when I realized there's a possibility we wouldn't have a quorum, is that I was happy to work on this just because it would be a good experience to really delve into the UPWP. You have to really delve in if you're going to write a comment letter. And I came out of it even more impressed with the work that the staff is planning to do. And seeing a little more integration, with their work, with the studies that have been done. Interestingly, I see like follow-up that are sometimes suggested in studies as being part of the work plan, which is good. So and it was a pleasure working with Fred on it. I mean, I really appreciated his revisions. So I'm pleased with what we put in. And we can discuss whether or not we can get that on our webpage, being as a contribution from participants in the advisory council, or we can just not have it on the webpage at all, but maybe have that for a potential discussion. So that's one thing from the last meeting that happened. The other thing is that we had another study that was presented to the MPO, and it's one study that we've been really looking forward to, not only us, but also other board members, and that is the follow-up, the before and after study for various TIP projects. I think we reviewed 4 of them, and that the results were really, really interesting. And so that I think is going to be on the agenda for our meeting next month. And so please try to attend, but if not, it'll be recorded. So that's it for the chair's report. The other thing is that we did get the tip out the door, so wrap that up. And if you are, I don't know to what extent anyone really looked at the draft, but the final report that Ethan composed is really very impressive. The draft was impressive enough, but the final product is really, really very impressive. And so, and as I mentioned at the meeting, he did this tracking on how he revised the draft, and I'd never seen someone track revisions like he did. But if you wondered what changes were made, you get to see them. And it's a good method. Sometime I'll maybe ask him how he did that tracking. So that's that. Chair's report. And of course you have no questions because I just answered everything, right? Everything you wanted to know about what's happened in the last month or so. Okay, yeah. So with that, we'll turn to the members for any old business, new business, member items. So maybe at this point, Stella, if you could drop the screen, because we're about to say goodbye. Yeah, great. I'm not seeing any hands up. All righty, so wow, we're gonna get 15 minutes back, so I don't have anything else, so we'll take a motion to adjourn, we can skedaddle.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, so that was a move in a second, and so I'm gonna give it to Andy because I heard the verse first, but I heard that loud second.
I'll second.
All right, so with no objections, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the beginning of summer.
Thank you all.